Man, an incredible couple.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
just a horrible
Yeah,
story and pain point that but man, I'm just so encouraged by them
me too.
and what they've done to partner with God to take back their story.
I mean,
That's
literally, they're
what it
like,
is.
nothing is wasted. Yeah, exactly.
Partnering with God to take back their story, and that's what we want for you guys too.
Yeah.
I told you that Greg and Kathy are interacting on our community platform. We've got other folks who are asking questions. Aubrey and I told you that we would like to answer those questions and be able to interact with you. This is a wonderful opportunity that we have. Our coaches are also there, and they're answering questions via text, right? They're like chatting in the forums, and they're
Yes, which
answering
I
some of these
love.
questions,
So cool.
which is so great because you're hearing from people who have walked through it.
Hmm.
But Aubrey and I love to be able to dialogue with you guys about this. On a podcast, we only get to dialogue with ourselves, each other,
Right.
right? And now it's cool that this almost feels like we're dialoguing with you. And
Yeah, I
so I want to
love
encourage you
this.
to ask those questions on the community platform right there on the general discussion feed. And we'll do our best to answer
Hmm.
them. And Aubrey, I've got one right here. I'm going to go ahead and kind of
Okay,
read through it
let's hear
and
it.
and let you talk through it first, then I'll kind of give my thoughts. Davey and Aubrey,
Okay.
my nephew Dimitri's death was devastating to my whole family.
Mm.
Obviously, most to my sister and brother-in-law. I started listening to your podcast about a month after, and now a little over a year later, I find myself losing patience, or probably better stated, mentally exhausted with trying to be a support for my sister.
Hmm.
I, along with a few others in the family, have been very intentional with our grief journey, and I'm finding myself guilty of some of the things you have talked about on when are you going to move forward type questions.
Yeah.
I'm grieving, but my sister is broken, and I acknowledge that. But she has continued to say she needs to be in her cave, not seeking outside help. I can only relate to her pain on a certain level. But how do we continue to support each other as we are on different grief journeys? How do we help each other take steps forward without forcing those steps? And how do families navigate a shared pain? Ooh, this is a
Mm.
big question. How do families navigate a shared
Yeah.
pain when some are
Yeah.
willing to seek counseling or outside support and others deny it?
Lots of good stuff to unpack
Lots
here.
of good stuff.
I would say, one, I appreciate this person's vulnerability and willingness to say, like, I feel frustrated at what's going on and how my
Yeah.
sister's grieving. And I think that's really, really honest, because I would
Yeah.
say many of us have watched how our loved ones have grieved and wished it looked different or was different,
Right.
or we don't think they're doing what they should be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes we don't want to admit that, but that's really,
Yeah.
really honest. So I appreciate this person's vulnerability so much. Thank you for
Absolutely.
bringing
Yeah.
all this up.
Yeah.
I Let me say a few things, Davey, and I would love to hear what you would say. But a few things came to mind, just with each of the statements. And I think that one of the things that struck me was, I started listening to your podcast, and now a year later, I find myself losing patience. And I don't know if that means Dimitri died a year ago. Okay. So
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
me be clear that I might be missing the timing about that.
Right.
But I would say, if it's been about a year or so,
Mm.
the first year of grief, especially if you've lost a child,
Yeah.
a spouse, is literally fog. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, Davey, you and I have talked about this before. Like, if you remember in a few months after your loved one died to take a shower, that feels like a victory. Like, oh,
Absolutely.
I remember how to use shampoo.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes if you're not the center of the grief yourself, it can be
Yeah.
really hard to realize the amount. Like, there's like grief tasks that have to be done in the first year,
Right.
and then there's grief fog.
Yeah.
And so it is really only after the first year that, like, I would say, like, even a deeper grief sets in, because now there aren't the
Sure.
tasks to keep you busy. Now the fog is starting to settle. And so
Mhm.
then grief begins to hit each new
Yeah.
holiday, each new event, each new season, each new,
Yeah.
I mean, it. And so I guess I would say, for this person's sister, like, if it, and again, I might be reading this wrong, but if it's really only been a little over a year,
Yeah.
that's barely scratching the surface of what grief means, especially
Right.
for
Right.
someone losing a child. So I would I'm not one to give advice, but I would say probably like you need to give your sister a lot more grace and not
Yeah,
expect. I think the hard part is we can't expect anyone to grieve on our timeline. Like
exactly.
once we're
Yeah,
doing that, we're putting ourselves in the place of God or
yeah,
authority, and everyone one grieves differently. I mean,
yeah.
everybody grieves differently. Like
Across
it's
the board,
I mean, it's
everybody.
almost like the uniqueness of God in our grief. Like everyone grieves
So
differently.
true. Yeah,
And everyone takes a different amount of time to
right.
grieve. I mean, my aunt lost her son Cameron, and it's been 7-8 years now. And it's not like the pain day to
Mm-mm.
day, she's okay, but it's not like the pain is different. And
Yep.
there are days when she still needs to be in her cave. And you
Yeah,
you just have to allow the grieving person to do that
yeah,
as
yeah,
long as they need to, really.
yeah.
And now I think this goes back to a conversation we've had in an earlier episode too, Davy, about self-care though. Like that doesn't mean you can't
Mm,
do your own healthy grief
absolutely. Yeah,
journey and you do what you need to do, what's right for your own soul. But you're not going to be able to force your sister like
right,
out of her cave, out the door. You can do a lot of praying, a lot of loving, a lot of
right.
empathy. And I would just say one more thing, and then I want you to speak to this, Davy. But the hard part with shared grief is that there's still the main center of grief. Like if you
Hmm.
think about grieving as like concentric circles, there's the griever, like the one in the middle who is the
Right.
most impacted.
Most affected by it. Yeah.
Outside of that is like kind of the next round. Outside of that would be the next round. So you'd go like extended family, friends,
Right.
neighbors,
Right.
etc. You, wherever you are in the concentric circle, you only really best practice get to grieve outward. So your
Yeah.
job is not to grieve inward and expect anything from the person at the center. Like
That's
the
good.
main griever gets to be the main griever. They
That's
get to
good.
grieve outward. Your job is not to go inward. You go outward. Does that make
Wow.
sense? Is that
That makes perfect sense.
because
Yes.
otherwise
Yeah.
you're burdening the griever, expecting something from them, and they are just not in a
Wow.
place to do that. But there are places you can go, and that's on the outside of
That's
those
great.
concentric
Wow,
circles.
Aubrey, that's so helpful. I've never heard that before. That is
Hmm.
so helpful. A very
Oh,
helpful
good.
picture there. Yeah, I've seen this phenomenon take place, obviously up close, and
Yeah.
also just working with other people as well. But that there is so much there's so much merit to like you know what I hear in this question. Let me say this: what I hear in this question is you desire for your sister to find wholeness.
That's it. Oh,
And
that's so good.
that is such a noble desire. I know your
Yeah.
heart is that you
Yeah.
want your sister to find wholeness and your
Yeah.
brother-in-law to find wholeness.
Yeah.
And so sometimes because of that, when we experience some of those breakthroughs of wholeness and we want to share that with others, we want to superimpose that onto others. And then sometimes just because we're fallible human beings, we kind of can slip into it being like, well, you should be experiencing
Yeah.
this as well. And the
Mm.
reality is again, everybody's going to grieve differently. And so
Yeah.
because your sister is going to be, there's no question about it, she's going to be the one that is most impacted with on the heaviest scale of grief when it comes to this. She is going to take a longer timeline.
Yeah.
It's natural. Now, I've also seen the phenomenon flip-flop. And let me tell you how I've seen this. I was forced every single day to wake up to the reality that Amanda was gone.
Because you've got a baby.
So it forced me. Yeah, well, baby, and just like
Oh,
waking
I
up
see
and
what
the
you're
other side of the
saying.
bed
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
And so it forced me to have to deal with that. And there would be
Mm.
people that I would interact maybe, even now we've interacted with some people who were in our church back then or I hadn't seen in several years. And their grief seems still a lot fresher than mine.
Wow.
Because they're operating life, right? They're no longer in where there's in a normal phase or rhythm of life where they would have seen Amanda, and so now my presence showing up in their life, whatever, we see each other at Target,
Yeah.
we see it, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden brings a
Like
lot of those
triggers.
emotions to the
Wow.
surface and triggers that because they haven't been forced to deal with those triggers every single day.
Wow.
So I can't sit here and look at them and go, you should be a lot further along than this, right? Even though
Right.
I'm the one that's been most impacted by this
Right.
grief, because
Right.
I have to hold space and grace for that,
Yeah.
and understand. Okay, there is a phenomenon that happens here. They haven't been forced to deal with this the way that I have, right? And so I've got to allow them to have that kind of grieving process on their own, and so the truth is that the Lord is the one that walks us in the grief journey. Other people surround us and they're there for us, but the moment that we begin kind of superimposing the like, this is what you should do, is the moment that we are guilty now of becoming like Job's friends.
Yeah, right.
And so what Job's
Right.
friends, the first like 7 days, they did a great job of just being there.
Yeah.
And Job needed to process this on his own in his own time. And he needed to like work through it with the Lord so that the Lord could show up. Because it was at the end of Job where the Lord showed up in Job's life and said, hey, let's reason. Let's talk about this. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what brought like this healing aha moment breakthrough for Job. That's what your sister needs. That's what you need. That's what we all need. And we can't force that.
Yeah. It's good, Davey.
And unfortunately, that's what so can be frustrating about the grieving process and helping other people in general is we can't force a work of the Holy Spirit.
Oh man, I wish we could sometimes, but you're right.
I wish we could too.
Yep.
We can offer presence. We can be available. And so my best advice to you would be this: just offer a safe space.
Yeah.
Always. Right. Just let that be open. So anytime your sister comes to you and if she begins to talk about things, even if in your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, you should be past this. Like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Why won't you go seek help? Why won't you go seek counseling? I get it. Like, yes, I hope your sister also goes to seek counseling as well. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like she needs that as well.
Yeah.
But she's not going to receive that from you.
Yeah.
And so for you to just be a safe space, listen, reflect, validate, hold that, be present. Hey, what do you need from me? That's a great question.
Yeah,
what can I do for? What do you need from me in this? She's like vomiting some of this stuff, right? That is probably I'll be honest with you, Aubrey. I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
I'm a solutions oriented person.
Right.
I want to give, here's what you should do.
Yep.
And so I'm so guilty of this. And I've had to work super hard in some interpersonal relationships to go, yeah, I hear you. What I'm hearing from you is this. What I hear in your voice is this. What do you need from me right now?
That's so good.
Oh, it like drives
you crazy because you want to be like, I know what you need to do.
I know what you need.
Yeah.
I know what you need. But what's crazy is I find that the result that I'm hoping for them actually gets expedited when I hold that space.
That's good.
Because the Lord is allowed to do the thing that he needs to do in that space.
That's right.
So I'm just like, I don't know. I want us to all learn to trust the Lord more across the board.
Yeah.
I know I need to, but also when it comes to helping other people, I think the Lord teaches us that.
Yep. So good. Thank you so much for that question. Obviously, David and I had a lot to say about that. So thank you so much for that. If you have questions, if you're looking for answers, if you just want resources to find, purpose out of your pain story, to take back your story, we would love to invite you to our community platform and our Community Plus platform at nothingiswasted.com/community. We also want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing all of the music. You can find his music wherever it is you stream your music. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Nothing Is Wasted Ministries. You can follow Davey at Davey Blackburn. You can follow me at ObSamp.